Egyptian Myths and Mysteries by Rudolf Steiner. Chapter 1. Spiritual Connections Between the Cultural Streams of Ancient and Modern Times. September 2nd, 1908. Should we query what spiritual science ought to signify for humanity, we shall, in all probability, drawing from the myriad impressions and sentiments developed throughout our endeavors in this domain, present the subsequent response to our innermost souls. Spiritual science must serve as a path toward the elevated cultivation of our humanity, indeed, of all that is fundamentally human within us. Thereby we establish an existential objective, one that is, in a sense, self-evident to every reflective and sensitive individual, an aim that encompasses both the realization of the loftiest ideals and the unfolding of the most profound and significant faculties within our souls. Throughout history, the most exemplary minds have contemplated how humanity might adequately manifest its inner potential, and to this inquiry the most diverse resolutions have been offered. Perhaps none is more concise or profound than the response Goethe offered, born of deep conviction, in his Mysteries. From the force that fetters all beings, that man delivers himself who overcomes himself. Profound significance resides in these words, for they demonstrate with clarity and precision the very core of all evolution, namely, that humanity cultivates its inner nature by transcending itself. By this means, we elevate ourselves, as it were, beyond our own limitations. The soul that conquers itself discovers the path leading beyond its immediate self to the ultimate treasures of human existence. This exalted objective of spiritual inquiry must be kept in view as we undertake the consideration of the theme that is to occupy our attention here. It shall guide us beyond the mundane horizons of existence toward sublime realities. We must survey vast expanses of time if we are to examine an epoch extending from ancient Egypt to our contemporary era. We shall be obliged to review millennia, and the insights we derive therefrom will be intimately connected with the most profound concerns of our souls, deeply affecting our innermost spiritual life. It is only in appearance that the individual striving toward the heights of existence distances himself from his immediate environment. Indeed, it is precisely through this ascent that he attains a comprehension of his daily concerns. One must disengage from the transient tribulations of daily routine and direct one's gaze toward the monumental events in the history of the world and its civilizations. Only then does he discover that which is most sacred to his soul. It may appear peculiar to suggest that intimate connections should be sought between our own era and ancient Egypt, the age in which the majestic pyramids and the Sphinx were erected. Initially, it may seem extraordinary that one might better comprehend one's own era by casting one's gaze so far into the past. But, precisely for this purpose, we shall look back upon far more extensive and comprehensive epochs. This approach will yield the insights we desire, namely, the possibility of transcending ourselves. To an individual who has already diligently studied the tenets of spiritual science, the search for a connection between widely separated historical epochs will seem by no means strange. It is one of our fundamental convictions that the human soul repeatedly returns, and that the experiences spanning from birth to death occur cyclically for us. The doctrine of reincarnation has thus become increasingly familiar to us. When we reflect upon this, we may ask, since the souls residing within us today have previously incarnated, is it possible that they were also present in ancient Egypt during its cultural epoch, that the very souls within us today are those which, in that ancient era, gazed upon the colossal pyramids and the enigmatic sphinxes? The answer to this question is in the affirmative. Our souls have indeed beheld those ancient cultural monuments which they encounter once more today. The identical souls that existed then have transitioned through subsequent eras and have reappeared in our contemporary age. We are cognizant that no life remains without fruit. We know that whatever experiences the soul has undergone remain preserved within it, manifesting in subsequent incarnations as faculties, temperament, capacities, and inclinations. Consequently, our modern perception of nature, our assimilation of contemporary developments, and our overall worldview were prepared in ancient Egypt, in the land of the pyramids. We were conditioned during that era in such a manner that we now perceive the physical world as we do. Precisely how these vastly separated epochs are interconnected is what we shall now investigate. If we wish to comprehend the deeper significance of these lectures, we must venture far back into the course of earthly evolution. We are aware that our Earth has undergone frequent transformations. Prior to ancient Egypt, there existed yet other civilizations. Through the medium of esoteric research, we are enabled to gaze far deeper into the dim, primeval epochs of human evolution, arriving at times when the Earth presented an appearance entirely different from its current state. Conditions were utterly dissimilar in ancient Asia and Africa. If we look back clairvoyantly into primordial times, we reach a juncture where a cataclysm of monumental proportions, wrought by aquatic forces, occurred upon our Earth, fundamentally altering its topography. If we regress even further, we reach an epoch when the Earth possessed a completely different physiognomy, when that which now constitutes the bed of the Atlantic Ocean, between Europe and America, was emergent land. We arrive at an era when our souls inhabited physical vehicles entirely different from those of today. We reach ancient Atlantis, concerning which exoteric science can as yet disclose very little. The territories of Atlantis were devastated by colossal deluges. Human bodies assumed different forms during that period, yet the souls residing within us today were likewise incarnate within the ancient Atlanteans. Those were, indeed, our own souls. Subsequently, the aquatic cataclysm prompted a movement of the Atlantean populations, initiating a great migration from west to east. We ourselves constituted these migrating peoples. Toward the twilight of Atlantis, all was in transition. We journeyed from the west toward the east, passing through the regions of modern Ireland, Scotland, Holland, France, and Spain. In this manner, these populations migrated eastward, settling Europe, Asia, and the northern territories of Africa. One must not assume that those who, in the final Great Migration, journeyed from the west into the regions that gradually evolved into Asia, Europe, and Africa, did not encounter pre-existing populations. Virtually the entirety of Europe, the northern reaches of Africa, and vast expanses of Asia were already inhabited at that period. These territories were not populated solely from the west. They had been settled in earlier epochs, so that this migration encountered an established, unfamiliar population. We may surmise that with the advent of more tranquil times, distinct cultural relations were established. There existed, for example, in the vicinity of Ireland, a region where, prior to the cataclysm that now lies millennia behind us, the most advanced segments of the global population resided. Under the sublime guidance of exalted individualities, these segments subsequently migrated through Europe to a region in Central Asia, whence cultural colonies were dispatched to the most diverse localities. One such colony of the post-Atlantean era was dispatched from this group into India, where they encountered a population established since primeval times, possessing its own unique culture. With due regard for the pre-existing conditions, these colonists founded the first post-Atlantean civilization. This occurred many millennia ago, and exoteric historical documents yield scarcely any record of it. The accounts preserved in such documents date from a far later period. In those sublime compendiums of wisdom known as the Vedas, we find merely the final echoes of a primordial Indian culture, which was guided by super-earthly beings and established by the holy rishis. It was a civilization of an incomparable nature, of which we today can conceive only a faint representation, for the Vedas are but a distant reflection of that primeval, sacred Indian culture. This epoch was succeeded by another, constituting the second cultural period of the post-Atlantean era. From this source, the wisdom of Zarathustra emanated, and the ancient Persian civilization arose. The Indian culture endured for a vast epoch, as did the Persian, which ultimately culminated in the figure of Zarathustra. Subsequently, under the influence of colonists dispatched to the fertile land of the Nile, there emerged that civilization collectively designated by four names: the Chaldean, Egyptian, Assyrian, Babylonian. This third post-Atlantean epoch arose within Asia Minor and northern Africa, attaining its zenith on the one hand in the sublime stellar lore of the Chaldeans and, on the other, in the cultural achievements of Egypt. Thereafter ensued a fourth age, developing in southern Europe, the era of Greco-Roman culture, which dawned with the epic songs of Homer and progressed to yield the masterworks of Greek sculpture and the tragic poetry of Aeschylus and Sophocles. Rome, too, belonged to this epoch. This epoch commenced in the 8th pre-Christian century, approximately in the year 747 BC, and persisted until the 14th or 15th century of the Christian era. Following this, we enter the fifth period, our contemporary era, which will in turn be succeeded by the sixth and seventh epochs. In the seventh period, ancient India shall manifest in a transfigured form. We shall perceive that a remarkable law governs these transitions, enabling us to comprehend the operations of sublime forces throughout the various epochs and the mutual relationships that bind these eras together. If we examine the initial period, that of the Indian culture, we discover that this primal civilization eventually undergoes a recrudescence, arising anew in the seventh epoch. Ancient India shall then manifest in a reconstituted form. Mysterious forces are at work herein. Furthermore, the second period, which we have designated as the Persian, shall reappear in the sixth epoch. Following the decline of our own civilization, we shall witness the revival of the Zoroastrian religion within the culture of that sixth period. Throughout the course of these lectures, we shall observe how, in our present fifth period, a species of reawakening of the third, or Egyptian, epoch transpires. The fourth period occupies a central position, unique unto itself, possessing no parallel in either the preceding or the succeeding ages. To elucidate this mysterious law further, the following observations must be appended. We are aware that ancient India possessed a structure that strikes our modern humanitarian consciousness as alien. The division into distinct castes, namely priests, warriors, merchants, and laborers. Such rigid stratification is utterly foreign to contemporary sensibilities. Yet within the first post-Atlantean culture, this division was by no means anomalous. It was entirely natural, for in those remote times, it was inevitable that human souls should be categorized into four distinct grades according to their inherent capacities. No sense of cruelty or hardship was perceived therein, as individuals were assigned their stations by leaders whose authority was so absolute that their prescriptions were accepted without question. It was understood that these guides, the 7 holy rishis, who had received their initiatory instruction from divine beings in Atlantis, possessed the spiritual vision to discern the proper placement for every soul. Thus, such a classification of humanity was deemed entirely natural. A fundamentally different form of grouping, however, shall manifest in the 7th period. While the division in the first epoch was instituted by external authority, in the 7th, human beings shall organize themselves according to objective principles. An analogous phenomenon may be observed in the insect world. Ants form a commonwealth which, in its remarkable structure as well as its capacity to perform a relatively prodigious volume of labor, is unrivaled by any human polity. Yet therein we find precisely what appears most alien to us, the caste system, insofar as each individual ant is assigned a specific task. Whatever our contemporary view of this may be, humanity will eventually perceive that its salvation lies in such a division into objective groups, wherein they will succeed in reconciling the division of labor with an absolute equality of rights. Human society shall then manifest as a sublime harmony. This is a prospect we can discern in the annals of the future. Thus, ancient India shall reappear, and in a corresponding manner, certain characteristics of the 3rd period shall recur in the 5th. Contemplating the immediate implications of our theme, we behold a vast domain. We contemplate the colossal pyramids and the enigmatic Sphinx. The very souls that once animated the ancient Indians were subsequently incarnated in Egypt, and are incarnated once more in our present age. Should we pursue this general line of inquiry into its particulars, we shall discover 2 phenomena indicating how, through super-earthly connections, mysterious threads bind the ancient Egyptian culture to our own. We have observed this law of repetition operating across the historical epochs, yet its significance becomes far more profound when we trace its workings within spiritual realms. We are all familiar with a painting of preeminent importance, an image that has surely presented itself to the inner vision of each of us at least once. I refer to Raphael's celebrated masterpiece, the Sistine Madonna, which through a particular sequence of historical circumstances has found its home in our midst, in central Germany. In this work, disseminated through countless reproductions, we have learned to admire the sublime purity diffused throughout the entire figure. We have all experienced a profound stirring in beholding the countenance of the mother, the singular manner in which her figure floats suspended in the air, and perhaps also the deep, searching expression in the eyes of the child. Furthermore, when we observe the surrounding cloud formations from which myriad small angelic heads emerge, we are moved by an even deeper sentiment, one that renders the entire composition far more intelligible to our souls. I am aware that it may appear audacious to suggest that if one gazes deeply and earnestly upon the child cradled in the mother's arms, and upon the background clouds coalescing into numerous angelic faces, one is overcome by the intuition that this child was not born of natural generation, but is rather one of those very beings who float amidst the clouds. The infant Jesus is himself such a cloud form, merely rendered somewhat more condensed, as though one of the little angels had descended from the clouds to rest upon the arm of the Madonna. Such would be a sound and healthy intuition. If we allow this inner perception to live within us, our perspective will broaden, liberating itself from certain narrow conceptions regarding the material laws of existence. Precisely through such a work of art, our restricted vision may be expanded to recognize that what must occur in a specific manner according to contemporary physical laws might, in a former age, have been quite otherwise. We shall discern that there once existed a mode of reproduction distinct from sexual generation. In short, we shall perceive profound connections between the human element and the spiritual forces represented in this painting. Such is the truth enshrined within it. If we permit our gaze to wander back from this Madonna to the epic of ancient Egypt, we are met by a similar, equally sublime image. The Egyptians possessed Isis, the figure associated with the words, "I am what was, what is, and what will be. No mortal has yet raised my veil." A profound mystery, heavily shrouded, manifests in the figure of Isis, the beloved goddess who, in the spiritual consciousness of the ancient Egyptian, was present with the infant Horus, just as the Madonna is present to us today with the child Jesus. Insofar as Isis is presented to us as a being bearing the eternal within her, we are once more reminded of the feelings we experience when contemplating the Madonna. We must discern deep mysteries in Isis, mysteries that are grounded in the spiritual realm. The Madonna is a remembrance of Isis. Isis appears once more in the Madonna. This is one of the connections to which I previously referred. We must learn to perceive through our feelings those profound mysteries that demonstrate a superearthly connection between ancient Egypt and our modern culture. Yet another connection may be presented to you today. We recall how the Egyptians treated their dead. We remember the mummies, and how anxiously they concerned themselves with preserving the outer physical form for vast periods of time. We know that they filled their tombs with these mummified remains, wherein the external form was preserved, and that, as mementos of the past physical existence, they provided the deceased with various utensils and possessions suited to the requirements of physical life. Thus, that which the individual had possessed in the physical world was to be retained. In this manner, the Egyptians bound the deceased to the physical plane. This custom became increasingly prevalent, serving as a distinctive hallmark of ancient Egyptian culture. Such a practice is fraught with consequences for the soul. Let us recall that our own souls once inhabited Egyptian bodies. Indeed, our souls were incarnated within those very physical vessels that subsequently underwent mummification. We are aware that when a human being, following death, is liberated from his physical and etheric vehicles, he attains a different state of consciousness. He is by no means devoid of awareness in the astral world. From this spiritual realm, he is capable of looking down, for even if he cannot look upward in his present state, he can nevertheless gaze down upon the physical earth. Consequently, it is of great import to him whether his former physical vessel has been preserved as a mummy, incinerated, or allowed to decay. Through this circumstance, a distinct connection is established, a mysterious bond that we shall presently examine. By virtue of the prolonged preservation of bodies in ancient Egypt, souls underwent a highly specific experience in the postmortem state. Upon looking down, they recognized their own physical remains. They were bound to this corporeal form. Beholding the image of their physical shape before them, this vessel assumed great significance, as the soul remains highly receptive to impressions after death. The impression left by the mummified body engraved itself deeply, shaping the soul in accordance with its form. These same souls subsequently underwent incarnations during the Greco-Latin epoch, and in our contemporary age, they reside within us. The act of beholding their mummified remains after death, and being repeatedly drawn back to them, was far from inconsequential. They directed their affinities toward these physical vessels, and the fruit of this downward gaze manifests now, in our fifth cultural epoch, as a contemporary inclination to assign paramount importance to external physical life. What we currently describe as an attachment to materiality originates from the capacity of these souls, from their vantage point in the spiritual world, to look down upon their own physical manifestations. Through this process, humanity learned to love the material world. As a consequence, it is frequently asserted today that the only matter of consequence is the physical existence between birth and death. Such perspectives do not emerge from nothingness. This observation is not intended as a critique of the practice of mummification. Rather, we wish merely to indicate certain necessities associated with the repeated incarnations of the soul. Without this contemplation of mummified remains, humanity would have been incapable of further development. Indeed, we would by now have lost all interest in the physical world had the Egyptians not maintained their mummy cult. Such a development was necessary if a genuine interest in the material world was to be awakened. Our current perception of the world is a direct consequence of the Egyptians' practice of mummifying the physical body after death. This cultural stream was guided by initiates who possessed the capacity to foresee the future. The preservation of bodies was by no means a caprice. Especially in those ancient times, humanity was guided by exalted individualities who ordained what was proper. This was enacted under authoritative guidance. Within the schools of the initiates, it was well understood that our fifth epoch was intricately connected with the third. These mysterious relationships were clearly perceived by the priesthood of that era, who established mummification precisely so that souls might acquire the inclination to seek spiritual experience within the external physical world. The universe is guided by wisdom, and this serves as a second illustration of such connections. Modern human thought is the direct outcome of experiences in ancient Egypt. Here we catch a glimpse of profound mysteries that reveal themselves within the currents of culture. We have scarcely touched upon these mysteries, for what has been demonstrated regarding the Madonna as a memory of Isis, combined with our observations on mummification, provides but a faint intimation of the actual spiritual connections. However, we shall shed further light upon these relationships, examining not only outer appearances but also that which lies behind the external facade. External life runs its course between birth and death. Yet, man experiences a far longer existence after death, within the realm we designate as Kamaloka and through the occurrences of the spiritual world. The experiences in the supersensible worlds are no more uniform than are our experiences here in the physical world. What, then, did we experience as ancient Egyptians in the beyond? When our gaze fell upon the pyramids and the Sphinx, how vastly different was the course of our existence, and how differently did our souls live between birth and death. That life cannot be compared to modern existence. Such a comparison would be meaningless, and the experiences between death and a new birth were far more dissimilar than the experiences of outer earthly life. During the Egyptian epoch, the soul experienced something entirely different from what it encountered in the Greek world, during the reign of Charlemagne, or in our contemporary era. Furthermore, evolution occurs within the spiritual world as well. Thus, what the soul experiences today between death and a new birth differs radically from the experiences of the ancient Egyptian upon relinquishing his physical form at death. Just as mummification exerted its unique influence, shaping the modern disposition, and just as this external life repeats itself from the third into the fifth epoch, so does evolution proceed in those mysterious realms between death and rebirth. This, too, we must investigate, and here again we shall discover a mysterious connection. Then we shall be capable of comprehending what lies within us as the fruit of that ancient epoch. We shall be led into the profound recesses of the labyrinth of earthly evolution. Yet, precisely through this we shall recognize the complete connection between the creations of the Egyptians, the thoughts of the Chaldeans, and our own lived experience today. We shall observe that which was achieved in antiquity flaring up once more in our surroundings and in the subjects that capture our interest. Both physically and spiritually, we shall obtain clues to this connection. It will also be demonstrated how evolution proceeds, and how the fourth period serves as a magnificent link between the third and the fifth. Thus, our souls shall rise to perceive the significant connections of the universe, and the fruit of this will be a profound understanding of that which lives within us. Chapter 2. The reflection of cosmic events in the religious views of men. September 3, 1908. Yesterday we examined certain connections within the spiritual relationships of the so-called post-Atlantean epoch. We observed how the first cultural epoch of this period is destined to recur in the seventh and final epoch, how the Persian culture will repeat itself in the sixth, and how the Egyptian culture, which will occupy our attention over the coming days, repeats itself within our own lives and destinies during the fifth period. Regarding the fourth culture, the Greco-Latin, we noted that it occupies an exceptional position, as it undergoes no repetition. Thus, we were able to outline, if only schematically, the mysterious connections within the cultures of the post-Atlantean epoch, which succeeded the era of Atlantis that perished through devastating aquatic catastrophes. This age following Atlantis must, in turn, perish. At the conclusion of our fifth great epoch, the post-Atlantean, catastrophes will occur that will operate in a manner analogous to those at the close of the Atlantean epoch. Through the war of all against all, the seventh culture of the fifth epoch will reach its conclusion. These are compelling connections indicated by such periodic repetitions, and upon closer examination, they will illuminate the depths of our soul life. To establish an adequate foundation, we must today allow further repetitions to pass before our mind's eye. We shall permit our gaze to wander far into the evolution of our earth, and we shall perceive that these vast horizons hold an intimate interest for us. Let us begin, however, with an admonition, a warning against a mechanical approach to these repetitions. When, within the realm of esoteric science, we speak of such periodic repetitions, asserting that the first cultural epoch recurs in the seventh, the third in the fifth, and so forth, it is easy for a certain propensity for intellectual combinations to assert itself, tempting us to apply such schematic diagrams to other contexts as well. It is simple to fall into the belief that we may readily do so, and indeed, numerous theosophical treatises contain a substantial amount of baseless speculation of this nature. Consequently, we must issue a rigorous warning that such intellectual combinations are by no means authoritative. Rather, only direct perception, spiritual vision, can guide us, without which we inevitably go astray. One must be strongly cautioned against relying on these mere cognitive constructs. That which we are permitted to read in the spiritual world may indeed be comprehended through logic, yet it can never be discovered by such means. Its discovery is reserved solely for direct spiritual experience. Should we desire a clearer comprehension of these cultural epochs, we must acquire a comprehensive overview of the Earth's evolution as it reveals itself to the initiate who is capable of directing his spiritual gaze toward the occurrences of the most remote antiquity. If we cast our gaze far back into the developmental history of our planet, we observe that the Earth has not always presented its current aspect. It possessed no solid mineral foundation such as exists today. The mineral kingdom had not yet assumed its present state. The earth did not sustain the same flora and fauna, and humanity was not yet clothed in the physical, fleshly bodies of the present era, possessing as yet no skeletal system. All of these structures were formed only at a later stage. The further back we look, the closer we approach a condition which, had we been able to observe it from cosmic distances, would have appeared as a vast mist, a delicate etheric cloud. This nebular mist was vastly larger than our present globe, extending to the outermost limits of our solar system and even beyond. It comprised a far-reaching primordial mass, wherein was contained everything that subsequently went into the formation of the Earth, the planets, and indeed the Sun itself. Had we been able to examine this vaporous mass closely, should an observer have approached it, it would have appeared to be composed entirely of minute etheric points. Just as a swarm of insects observed from a distance appears as a single, homogeneous cloud, yet reveals its individual members upon closer inspection, so too would this primal mass have behaved. In this manner did the substance of our earth exist in the most remote antiquity, though at that stage it was not material in the modern sense, but condensed only to an etheric state. This terrestrial formation consisted of individual etheric points, yet a profound mystery was connected with these points. Had the physical human eye been capable of perceiving them, it would have failed to discern what the clairvoyant beheld, or indeed what he perceives today when casting his vision backward. Let us clarify this by means of an analogy. Consider the fully developed seed of a wild rose. What does an observer perceive in it? He sees an exceedingly minute object, and were he unfamiliar with its nature, he would never conceive that a rose could blossom from it. He could never deduce such a potential from the mere external form of the seed. Yet, an individual endowed with a certain degree of clairvoyant capacity would experience a different phenomenon. The physical seed would gradually fade from his sight, and to his spiritual vision there would appear a flower-like form arising spiritually from the seed. It would stand before his supersensible gaze as a concrete reality, yet one perceptible solely to the spirit. This form represents the archetype of that which subsequently develops from the seed. We would err, however, were we to believe that this form is identical to the physical plant that eventually emerges. It bears no such resemblance. It is a magnificent form of light, woven of currents and complex configurations. One might well assert that the plant which subsequently grows from the seed is merely a shadow of this wondrous spiritual light form beheld by the clairvoyant. Retaining this image of how the clairvoyant perceives the archetype of the plant, let us now return to the primeval earth and those individual etheric points. If, as in the preceding example, the clairvoyant were to contemplate such an etheric point within the primordial substance, there would arise from it a luminous and beautiful form, one which is not physically present but lies dormant within that point. What is this form that the seer perceives when gazing back upon this primal terrestrial atom? What is it that thus arises? It is a form as distinct from physical humanity as the archetype is from the physical plant. It is the archetype of the contemporary human form. At that epoch, the human form slumbered spiritually within the etheric point, and the entirety of Earth's evolution was required to allow that which lay dormant there to develop into modern man. Innumerable conditions were necessary to achieve this, just as manifold factors are required for the seed, which must be embedded in the soil and warmed by the solar rays before it can unfold into a plant. We shall gradually comprehend how these points developed into human beings if we clarify for ourselves the occurrences of the intervening epochs. In the primeval past, all the planets were united with our Earth. However, we shall first restrict our consideration to the Sun, the Moon, and the Earth, as they are of paramount interest to us. In that era, our Sun, Moon, and Earth were not discrete bodies, but existed as a unified whole. If we were to imagine these three bodies blended together like a substance in a vast cosmic crucible, conceiving of this as a single celestial body, we would apprehend the Earth in its original condition. Sun, Earth, and Moon combined. Naturally, humanity could exist there only in a spiritual state, a condition necessitated by the fact that the forces now concentrated in the Sun were then still united with the Earth. For vast epochs, this cosmic body contained our Earth, Sun, and Moon within itself, along with all the beings and forces associated with them. Throughout those ages, man existed only in a spiritual state within the primal human atom. This state changed only when a momentous event occurred in cosmic evolution. The separation of the Sun, which became an independent body, leaving the Earth and Moon behind. Consequently, what was previously a unity appeared as a duality, as two distinct cosmic bodies, the Sun and the combined Earth-Moon. What was the purpose of this separation? Every event in evolution naturally possesses a profound significance, which becomes comprehensible when, looking backward, we discover that there dwelt upon the Earth at that time not only human beings, but also other entities of a spiritual nature who were intimately connected with them. Though imperceptible to the physical eye, these entities were nonetheless present, as actual in their existence as humanity and other physical creatures. Thus, for example, there are connected with our Earth, inhabiting its spiritual periphery, beings whom Christian esotericism designates as angels or angeloi. We may best conceive of these beings if we consider that they currently occupy the evolutionary stage which humanity will attain only when the Earth completes its developmental cycle. At present, these entities have already reached the level of development that man will possess at the culmination of his terrestrial evolution. A still more elevated stage is occupied by the archangels, the archangeloi or spirits of fire, beings whom we may perceive when we direct our attention to the forces guiding entire nations. The destinies and affairs of such collective groups are guided by these beings, known as archangels or archangeloi. A yet higher order of being is designated as the primal beginnings, the archai or spirits of personality. We encounter these entities when we contemplate entire historical epochs and the relationships and contrasts among various nations, observing that which is commonly termed the zeitgeist or spirit of the age. When we examine our own era, for instance, we find that it is guided by these lofty beings designated as the archai or primal beginnings. Beyond these are still higher beings, referred to in Christian esotericism as the powers, the exousiai, or spirits of form. Thus, there are innumerable spiritual beings connected with our Earth who are related to humanity within a hierarchical ladder of successive evolutionary stages. If we begin with the mineral kingdom and ascend through the plant and animal kingdoms to humanity, we find that man is the highest physical being. Yet these higher, supersensible entities are likewise present, dwelling among us and permeating our very existence. In the primordial origin of things, when the Earth emerged from the womb of eternity as a species of primeval mist, all these entities were intimately bound to the terrestrial sphere. A clairvoyant observer would have perceived how other sublime beings permeated this cosmic tableau alongside the emerging human form. These comprised the aforementioned entities, as well as beings of an even loftier order, such as the virtues, dominions, thrones, cherubim, and ultimately the seraphim. All of these celestial existences were profoundly intertwined with that potent etheric dust, yet they occupied diverse stages of development. There are some whose transcendent sublimity surpasses human comprehension, while others abide closer to man's own level of being. Given that these entities resided at disparate developmental stages, they could not undergo their evolution in a manner identical to that of humanity. A suitable habitation had to be fashioned for them. Among these exalted entities, certain spirits would have been severely impeded had they remained bound to lesser beings. Therefore, they effected a separation. They extracted the most refined substances from the primordial mist to establish their dwelling within the sun. There they fashioned their celestial haven, securing the precise cadence requisite for their evolution. Had they remained conjoined with the denser, inferior substances left behind within the earth, their evolutionary progress would have been entirely arrested. This would have obstructed their development like a leaden weight. This demonstrates that material phenomena, such as the cleavage of the cosmic substance, do not arise from purely physical causes, but are rather dictated by the forces of spiritual beings requiring an appropriate locus for their progression. It occurs because they must construct their cosmic dwelling. We must emphasize that spiritual causes lie at the very foundation of these occurrences. Man remained behind upon the combined earth and moon, accompanied by higher beings of the lowest celestial hierarchy, such as angels and archangels, as well as by entities occupying a lower station than humanity itself. Yet a single mighty entity, who had already attained the maturity requisite to migrate to the sun, chose to sacrifice himself and remain with the earth and moon. This was the being subsequently designated as Yahweh or Jehovah. He departed the solar sphere to assume dominion over the affairs of the earth plus moon. Thus, we have two distinct habitations, the sun and the conjoined earth and moon. Upon the sun dwelt the most exalted spirits under the leadership of a singularly supreme and sublime entity, whom the Gnostics sought to comprehend under the name of Pleroma. We must envision this being as the regent of the sun. Yahweh reigned as the leader of the earth plus moon. It is of paramount importance to clarify that the noblest and most elevated spirits departed with the solar body, leaving the earth, together with the moon, behind. At that juncture, the moon had not yet severed itself, but remained embedded within the earth. In what manner should one conceive of this cosmic event, the separation of the sun from the earth? Above all, one must perceive the sun and its denizens as the most august, pure, and sublime element previously unified with our globe, whereas the earth and moon represented the denser, inferior element. In that epoch, the condition of the earth was far more degraded than that of our contemporary world. The present earth occupies a loftier state because of a subsequent epoch during which it unburdened itself of the moon and its more coarse substances, under the influence of which humanity could have achieved no further development. The earth was compelled to expel the moon. Immediately preceding this event, however, the earth endured its darkest and most harrowing epoch. Every element possessing a noble evolutionary disposition fell under the dominion of malevolent forces, such that humanity could only advance by casting out these worst conditions of existence, together with the moon. We must understand that a sublime principle of light, emanating from the sun, stood in stark opposition to the principle of darkness associated with the moon. Had one observed the already withdrawn sun through clairvoyant perception, one would have discerned not only the beings destined to inhabit it, but something else besides. That which had separated as the sun would have revealed itself not merely as a gathering of spiritual entities, nor would it have appeared as something purely etheric, which belongs to a denser realm, but rather as something astral, manifest as a majestic aura of light. What was intuitively sensed as a principle of light would have been visibly perceived as a resplendent aura illuminating cosmic space. The earth, by permitting this light to depart, would have appeared suddenly densified, though it had not yet achieved a solid mineral consistency. A good and an evil, a luminous and an obscure principle, confronted one another at that time. Let us now contemplate the aspect of the earth prior to the expulsion of the moon. It would be entirely erroneous to imagine it as resembling our contemporary globe. The core of the earth was at that time a tempestuous, fiery mass. This core would have presented itself as an igneous nucleus enveloped by powerful aqueous forces, though these were unlike the water of the present day, containing as they did metals in a liquefied state. Amidst this tumult resided man, albeit in an entirely different form. Such was the appearance of the earth when it cast out the moon. Air was nowhere to be found upon the earth. It was simply non-existent. The entities of that epoch required no atmosphere, possessing an entirely different respiratory system. Man had assumed the semblance of an amphibian or fish-like creature, composed of a soft, fluidic substance. That which he absorbed was not air, but rather the elements dissolved within the waters. This represents, in essence, the condition of the earth during that epoch. We must recognize that the earth then existed in a far more rudimentary state than it does today. It was of necessity so. Indeed, humanity could never have secured the proper cadence and the necessary conditions for its evolution had the sun and the moon not detached themselves from the earth. Had the solar forces remained bound within the earth, the pace of development would have been excessively accelerated, whereas under the sole influence of the forces now residing in the moon, all progress would have been rendered intolerably sluggish. As the moon withdrew from the earth amidst cataclysmic upheavals, there gradually prepared itself what we may term the segregation of an atmospheric envelope from the aqueous element. The atmosphere of that time differed entirely from the air of today, heavily laden as it was with diverse vapors. Yet the entity then slowly coalescing constituted a preliminary sketch of modern man. We shall expound upon this more comprehensively in due course. We have thus come to comprehend man in three distinct relationships. First, as he existed within the unified Earth-Sun-Moon body, cohabiting with all the higher entities in a single cosmic vessel. In this state, he presented himself to the clairvoyant gaze in the manner delineated above. Next, we observe him under adverse conditions upon the conjoined earth and moon. Had he remained in this state, he would have degenerated into a malevolent and feral being. Upon the departure of the sun, there arose the stark contrast between the solar sphere on one side and the earth plus moon on the other. The sun, in all its radiant splendor, shone as a vast solar aura in the cosmos, while opposite it remained the earth and moon, fraught with those sinister forces that drag down the nobler elements in man. A duality thus emerged, which was subsequently followed by a trinity, sun, earth, and moon. Contemplating this third period, man perceives these forces as a threefold principle. He asks, whence proceed these forces? During the first period, man remained connected with all the exalted forces of the sun. Subsequently, the forces that developed in the second period departed with the moon. Man experienced this departure as a redemption, yet he preserved a memory of the primordial epoch wherein he was still conjoined with the solar beings. He came to understand the nature of longing, perceiving himself as an exiled son. Through the forces that had departed with the sun and the moon, he could deem himself a son of both the sun and the moon. Thus, our earth evolved from a unity to a duality, and finally to a trinity: sun, earth, and moon. The era in which the moon severed itself, granting man for the first time the opportunity for self-development, is designated as the Lemurian epoch. After immense igneous catastrophes had brought this Lemurian epoch to a close, our Earth gradually entered a state capable of producing the conditions that prevailed in ancient Atlantis. The initial vestiges of dry land began to emerge from the watery deeps. This epoch occurred long after the departure of the moon. Indeed, it was solely due to this separation that the Earth was enabled to progress along its evolutionary path. In Atlantis, humanity differed fundamentally from its modern counterpart, having attained a state wherein individuals could traverse the atmospheric envelope as a malleable, swimming, and floating mass. It was only by gradual degrees that the skeletal structure began to develop. By the middle of the Atlantean epoch, human development had advanced sufficiently to bear a nascent resemblance to our contemporary form. Yet, the Atlantean possessed a clairvoyant consciousness. Our current state of awareness emerged only in far later epochs. Thus, to comprehend the humanity of that era, we must keep this clairvoyant perception in view. This may be best understood by contrasting it with contemporary consciousness. At present, man perceives the external world from dawn until dusk through his sensory organs. By means of this sensory activity, he perpetually receives impressions of sight, sound, and other faculties. At night, however, this sensory world dissolves into an ocean of unconsciousness. To the occultist, this state represents not so much an absence of consciousness as a lower grade of awareness. At this juncture, it must be clarified that modern man possesses a dual consciousness: a vivid waking consciousness and a sleeping or dreaming consciousness. Such a division did not exist during the initial phases of the Atlantean epoch. Let us examine the alternation between waking and sleeping in those primordial times. During a given period, man descended into his physical vessel, yet he did not perceive objects with the distinct contours visible today. If we imagine walking through a dense fog wherein street lamps appear shrouded in an aura of light, we may gain an approximate conception of the Atlantean's objective consciousness. For the human being of that era, all things were encircled by such a vapor, appearing as though enveloped in mist. This was the aspect of the world by day. By night, circumstances assumed an entirely different character, though still distinct from our contemporary experience. Upon departing from his physical body, the Atlantean did not sink into oblivion, but entered a realm of divine spiritual beings, individuated ego beings, whom he perceived surrounding him as his companions. Just as modern man fails to perceive these entities during the night, so did the early human plunge into an ocean of spiritual reality, wherein he actively perceived these divine intelligences. By day, he was the companion of the lower kingdoms of nature. By night, he associated with loftier beings. Man existed within a spiritual consciousness, dim though it was, and despite lacking self-consciousness, he resided among these divine spiritual entities. Let us now recapitulate the four principal epochs in the evolution of our Earth. First, let us recall that epoch in which the sun and moon remained unified with the terrestrial body. During this phase, the beings of the earth were purely archetypal, while man existed solely as an etheric form, discernible only to spiritual vision. We then proceed to the second epoch. Here we perceive the sun as an independent body, visible as a radiant. Do you want access to this and all the complete audiobooks on the channel, plus the ebook version? Click the link in the description or scan the QR code in the left corner of the screen to access our library, where you can listen to your favorite esoteric books without ad interruptions, lock your screen, or use other apps while the narration plays, and even download the ebook version to follow along as you listen. Listen on your computer via web browser, or download the app from the Play Store. After subscribing, you will receive an email with your login details, password, and step-by-step instructions on how to access the books through the Hotmart app.